very much appreciate you coming in, stopping in for day two, the final day of this year's Disability and Mental Health Summit. As you know, we've been doing this for several years. I think this is our 8th year probably that we've been doing it. And we always are blessed and have a great time doing a legislative panel discussion. I very much appreciate, what it takes for us to do this. And this year, there was support of Chairman Bizzarro, who's the chairman of the Democratic Policy Committee. I would note on this one here, I want to thank some of my Republican friends like Representative Ortita and Senator Bartolotta and so forth. They're generally with us. To be honest with it, given the nature of how everything worked, we don't have them here today. I know their passion for it. They'll be with us next year. That's all on me, but I very much appreciate their support. We are glad to have a bicameral group of Democrats who are here this year on virtuality here. We have some people with us who are going to be in Harrisburg and some people who are going to be here online with us. So I want to first thank all my colleagues for joining us today, and it really helps make the panel work. We have 2 great panel discussions that we're going to be going into. One is going to be going on some of the financial challenges of having a disability and what the limitations mean to how you can go about your life. So we have a great panel of self-advocates who are going to be talking us through that. And it's going to relate to some action that has actually, I think Wayne would know, has probably just come out of the Senate and probably is on its way to the House as we speak. We're also then going to hear from our Allegheny County Public Defender's Office and about some of the great work that they've been doing. And I appreciate Attorney Hudak is here, as well as all the support from the Allegheny County Public Defender's Office to be sure that we can understand some of the special education concerns and issues that are coming about our kids who are in delinquency placement systems. So we're going to be talking about their goals and their issues as well. So we appreciate that on the second half of today's panel. For those who are joining, for participating in this year, I want to obviously do a little reminder. Typically, of course, our Disability Summit is one which provides continuing education. This year, due to the virtual format, it does not. So I do apologize for that. It's just something that with the tech issues, we could not do. So we still enjoy. We hope that you'll stay with us through the whole program. I also want to note that we appreciate our interpreters who are great and fantastic for the work that they do, being sure that everybody has access to the discussion. I also want to thank Gateway, who's been a great sponsor for this year's event, to be sure that we can have such qualified interpreters in every session. So I thank them as well. So that is fantastic. Look, the Disability and Mental Health Summit was started obviously with the goal of trying to provide resources in Western PA in particular, but also to raise dialogue on issues across the board. Most every family has a disability or mental health story, and that's true. But we know that it's still a difficult sort of area for people to gain expertise in. The members who are joining us here, many of them, I mentioned Senator Fontana. I think Wayne has been with us every year that we've done it. Many of them have done that as well. And even some of our newer members have been fantastic with their reaching out, like Representative Genst, who is joining us from the other side of the state. I very much appreciate that. So before we go, I want to start. I just want to be sure to give everybody a quick shout out if they can. I actually want people to just say hello, just tell us all where you're coming from. So we're going to do it a little bit chaotic. I'm going to try to call it out. If you can't, just come on the camera real quick and let people know you're here. So I'm going to do it for all the members, but I got to go with one of my great senators that I've had the pleasure working with here in Allegheny County, Senator Fontana. Please, a quick hello.
Thanks, Dan. Hello, everyone. I'm State Senator Wayne Fontana. I reside in Allegheny County. That's where my district is, my whole district. As Dan mentioned, I try to be at his summit every year because it's very, very, very important that we discuss these issues and then have some action about them. So from this summit, hopefully more action will come to help these folks, because that's our job as legislators, is to help folks in this disability community. So thank you for inviting me, Dan.
Thank you always, Senator. Representative Davis.
Well, hey, Dan, thanks for having this. This is, I think, my 4th Mental Health and Disability Summit legislative panel. It's always a phenomenal resource. I'm State Representative Austin Davis, I represent the 35th Legislative District, which is the Mon Valley here in Allegheny County. And I also have the pleasure of serving as the delegation chairman for our Allegheny County House Democratic delegation, and looking forward to a great discussion. Thanks for all your work.
Thank you. Representative Genst.
Hi, good morning. Nancy Ganis. I represent the 152nd District, Montgomery County, and part of Philadelphia. This is my first, I'm new here, so I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Representative Sanchez.
Good morning, everybody. Ben Sanchez. I am Nancy's neighboring district down here in Montgomery County, southeastern PA, and looking forward to another productive summit discussion. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Representative Isaacson.
Hi, I'm Representative Mary Isaacson from Philadelphia County, and I want to thank you, Representative Miller, for having a policy committee be a part of your summit, and I look forward to hearing all the presentations. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Piscatano.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nick Piscitano. I'm from the 38th Legislative District, which is in the Mon Valley next to Austin Davis. This is my first year in the legislature and first summit, so I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, brother. And I know we have some members in Harrisburg, so I'm hoping that we can hear from them now. I think Chairman Sonato is there.
Thank you, Chairman Miller. It's great to be here and participate once again. I remember being in Pittsburgh 2 years ago, and it was an excellent event. Had a chance to visit with many of the students that were there that day, and we got to participate hands-on. I think it's a great program, Chairman Miller, and keep up the good work with this. I think it is so important in our disability community and for our region. So I look forward to today's hearing here in Harrisburg, and listen to all the testifiers, and let's just keep this going, and whatever, hope we get some great stuff out of this today. Thank you.
Good morning, Mark Longetti. I represent the 7th District, which is in Mercer County, and also have had an opportunity to participate in the summit in the past. It's very well organized, very well done. It's great to put a focus and really have a robust discussion about how we assist folks and allow them to have the fullness of their lives. So thank you very much, Chairman Miller.
Thank you. Okay, is that everybody in Harrisburg? There we go. All right. So thank you very much. And I know we have some staff from some other members' offices as well. And I know we'll have some other members joining us too. So thank you all. We very much appreciate. But let's get to our first panel here. So I'm very thankful for some of these people have been longtime Summit friends. So I'm going to try to be very quick through their bios, and they did cut them down for me, which I appreciate because they have so many good things to talk about. But again, our first panel is going to be on MAUD, and if you don't really know what it is, trust me, you're going to want to know. You're going to hear this now. It's going to be very good, very informative things we need to talk about for changes. So that being said, we will have Dr. Josie Badger, again, no stranger to our summit. She has a bachelor's degree from Geneva College in Disability Law and Advocacy, a master's from the University of Pittsburgh in Rehab Counseling, and a doctorate from the Duquesne University in Healthcare Ethics. And I know I'm going fast, so I apologize to our interpreters. In 2014, she founded the J. Badger Consulting, where she provides disability consulting services. She's the director of the National Transition Center, RAISE. She's the campaign manager of the United Way of Southwestern PA's I Want to Work campaign, the senior field organizer for the Family Care Act with the Women and Girls Foundation, and is the project director of TRAIL, a statewide advocacy and lobbying training program. She's on the boards United Way, Woodlands, the Mary Grace Hospice Foundation, FISA, and in 2012, she was crowned Miss Wheelchair America. Man, that's a lot going on, Josie, but thank you as always for being here. Matt Berwick, appreciate Matt. He's the program manager of disability accommodations and clinical services for the UPMC healthcare system and the Disabilities Resource Center, and teaches part-time at the University of Pittsburgh. He has worked in the area of disability services for almost a decade, serving on local, state, and national boards for people with disabilities, and currently serves as the president of the United Spinal Association of Western PA. Prior to joining UPMC, Matt worked in higher education and as a youth specialist focusing on transition. He has a BA in elementary education and MA in adult learning and training, and he's very active in Pittsburgh disability sports community and advocating in many areas for people with disabilities. Matt, it is always a pleasure. Caitlin Kerr is joining us. She's a disabled artist and advocate. She holds degrees in English Lit, nursing, and nursing leadership. She had to leave the profession after her disabilities progressed several years ago. Caitlin focuses on running a Shakespearean theater company with her partner, Jonathan. She is also a published poet and actor. She has 3 beautiful cats that take up over half the photo space on her phone. Caitlin also volunteers for PAR as a sexual assault counselor and an intimacy choreographer, director for theater, a role grounded in boundaries and consent in order to protect artists and create a better art when physical intimacy is involved. Much of her artistic work grows out of the reality of living with a rare chronic pain disorder and finding meaning in art, beauty, and connection with others. Caitlin, thank you. Her advocacy on this issue actually was to a bunch of us, me, Nick, and Representative Benham, if I recall. She was great in reaching out to talk to us about this issue. Jessica Keogh, I hope I got that right, resides in Westchester, Pennsylvania, where she teaches students who have difficulty regulating their emotions. Being born with a yet-to-be diagnosed type of muscular dystrophy, Jessica has dedicated her life to educating, advocating, and empowering people with disabilities and those without, so they can live their most empowered lives. Jessica's done this through the way she lives, teaches, and advocates for meaningful change for people with disabilities. She's currently pursuing her doctorate in educational policy and administration. Jessica her research surrounds critical disability studies and representation in curriculum. Once she earns her EDD, she will write policies and curriculum that help all children. Thank you, Jessica, for joining us. And William Del Toro Vargas. William, they put you down here, my friend, as a supporter of these initiatives and a former legislative advocate. And William, I know that you have many more things here than that for us to have referenced, but I thank you for joining us. I guess they said brief, brother, you took it brief, and so we appreciate that as well. That being said, it's a terrific panel, and I'm going to kick it over to the good doctor, who I know knows how to make things succinct and helps us get to the point and understand where we as legislators can make a difference. She's fantastic. Dr. Badger, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Representative. Thank you all for being here and joining us today. As was mentioned, I am Dr. Josie Badger. I only use the doctor on Christmas cards, so just call me Josie. And we are here today to talk to you about something really important, not only to us, but to the state of Pennsylvania. And this is the medical assistance for workers with disabilities, Workers with Job Success Bill. Quite a name for it. And this bill is going to be life-changing. Pennsylvania in the past few years has made tremendous strides in improving the employment outcomes of people with disabilities. And I've had the honor and privilege of working with various campaigns to bring about these changes. We did work on, if you might remember, making sure that students with disabilities in high school had work opportunities. I worked on the campaign along with William on Employment First Pennsylvania. I've been using bills such as the ABLE Act, and we've made tremendous strides. And while we were planning on what was our next effort, with the hashtag I Want to Work campaign, over and over in my heart, my head, I said, these are great. We are opening doors for the largest minority population, people with disabilities in the world, in the state, to work. It just so happens the largest minority group in the world has the highest unemployment rate. And so that means that we're opening doors for them to work, but we had not to this point supported those employees to actually take those jobs. And so that is where it all began. We have been educating people with disabilities since the 70s, some before. We have been providing them with higher ed, with job coaching. We have invested in the medical support to allow those of us with significant disabilities to live and thrive far into adulthood that maybe we wouldn't have been even just a few decades ago. And now here we are. And we are willing, waiting, and able, and the key word there is waiting, to pursue our maximum unique and personal potential. And so that is why we are before you today. There are two bills. We have Senate Bill 156 and House Bill 1115, which are both identical bills that are in the House and Senate right now. And we can make a difference for our largest minority group in Pennsylvania. And I just wanted to quickly mention that whether we are sitting at home, receiving governmental cash benefits, living in the confines of poverty, or we are making $70,000, our needs do not change. I still need 24-hour care. I still need a ventilator, but those are things that I could not afford. And for the individuals on this call, they could not afford the care and services that they need to be successful. And so that doesn't change. We want to make sure through this legislation and future legislation that we are getting out of the way to allow people to work, to be successful, to be contributing citizens, to be able to get married, to be able to have families and live full, productive lives. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend, Will Del Toro Vargas, to talk a little bit about diversity and barriers to employment when they're compounded with disability, especially, and what the original mod bill has done. So, William?
So, good morning, everyone. So, currently in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the Medicaid program is currently supporting about 30,000 Pennsylvanian employees with disabilities, and those employees with disabilities are either receiving Medicaid or home and community-based services, which makes it possible for them to work. What is MAUD? MAUD allows people with disabilities to work without losing their benefits. But when you think about MAUD, that sounds really, really dandy, right? But there are some limitations to MAUD. One of those limitations that you can only earn up to 250% of the federal poverty rate a year and have up to $10,000 in assets. Okay, the eligibility criteria is complicated, and there is a lack of knowledge across all communities in the Commonwealth. And so the benefits counselors, the local client assistance offices encourages people not to pursue MAUD because it is just so difficult to get an access to it. Okay, one of the issues that we currently have with MAUD is that if people that are employed earn even one more dollar than what they're allowed, they're at great risk of losing those critical benefits, you know. And some of the most important critical benefits are really the home and community-based services. You know, people who are currently receiving home health aides and nursing services, and like my friend Dr. Badger, ventilators and durable medical equipment. And another of those great services that would support MAUD would be employment services, you know, job coaching and career exploration, and job development for people with disabilities. Without these services, without MAUD, it would make this impossible. What's going on with MAUD, why the cap needs to be increased, basically, is because workers with disabilities are being prevented from taking more hours at work. And let me be very clear, it's not so much about the hours that they're taking on, it's more about the receiving income they're receiving, you know, the wages they're receiving. So it's not so much that they can't work 40 hours a week, which is the full-time range. is that they can earn the correct hourly rate. So unless someone is making up to minimum wage, they'll be able to keep MAUD. But if someone with like Dr. Badger, who has a doctorate degree in medical ethics, she can make the wage that that correlates with her educational background. Okay, we're not able to take raises or bonuses because it does affect our our eligibility criteria for MAUD. Okay, again, it's all income based, so it does depend on the income you're currently receiving. We're not able to get married. Some of us are already married, but we are always at the brink every day of losing our benefits due to the income that our partners may be receiving. Okay, and it does affect us for the future. You know, we all work in our lives for retirement, hopefully, you know, to have some type of future. We're not able to have 401ks, 403bs, any type of retirement savings plan because of the current MAUD caps. The issue surrounding that is counted as a resource, you know, that you can tap into at any time. And with the current MAUD caps, it will not allow it, or it would allow it if you remain below the 250% of the federal poverty rate. And so that being said, it really restrains people with disabilities from gaining gainful employment, and it goes and it connects to our Employment First legislation, which promotes the competitive employment for people with disabilities. But it's not possible if we don't increase the MAUD rate right now for people to be able to get a competitive wage in their fields. When you look at MAUD, it is one of the most underused public assistance service in the Commonwealth. It really is, because there's not much knowledge about it. But if you look at it, it is one of the oldest public assistance service in the Commonwealth. That's the most interesting part. It's the oldest, but not the most known. There's a lack of knowledge for those who access it. There's a lack of knowledge for the county assistance offices. There's a lack of knowledge in the legislative and governor's office. It just goes right downhill from there. And so when you look at the diverse population, from where I come from is North Philadelphia, which is mainly Hispanics. The issues around MAUD in that area is that people are afraid to work because they will lose specifically their Medicaid services, their health insurance. Okay, there is, you know, there's just a myth that people lose the benefits because even if they work more than 20 hours, instead of talking about income, they talk about hours. If they work more than 20, they lose their benefits, and it's more about income. And so we need to increase education about MAUD. We need to increase the cap on MAUD. It would make us, it will allow us to continue to contribute into society. And so that would just make the Commonwealth better for it. And now I'm just going to turn it right back over to Dr. Badger. Hopefully I kept under my 3 minutes.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to re-emphasize to all of you that we are talking about $1 over the income limit of 250% of the federal poverty level. We are talking about $1 over our max family assets of $10,000 and one house and one car, and we lose it all. And these are not to be taken lightly. My care is about $250,000 a year. I can't afford to be successful, and I believe that all of us on this could echo those sentiments. So what I want to emphasize is, what would this new bill look like? Senate Bill 156, House Bill 1115, MAUD, Workers with Job Success. This bill would allow for the development of a new category of workers supported under MAUD. It would allow these individuals, once they've gotten into this new category of workers with job success, they could earn as much as they could. They could save and not be at risk of losing their medical assistance, of losing their home and community-based services, and ultimately would allow folks to get married and not have to worry about that. And as Will said, a lot of people maybe get married and risk that loss since it's considered a household income, not based just on the employee. But many of us are deciding not to get married. And that was my choice because of my fear of losing benefits. And so this would change our lives. I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin to share her story about what this would mean for her.
Yes, so I'm going to share a little bit of a personal story about the inherent marriage penalties that come with the way the system is currently set up and the way the bill is currently set up. So my partner and I are soulmates, and like many couples, we dream of getting married, but we cannot because I'm disabled. So this past year, I've watched my able-bodied friends struggle with postponing or downsizing their weddings due to COVID while living with the reality that I can never get married legally, perhaps publicly without risk, or even act married without risking loss of life-sustaining healthcare. This is a nuanced issue, of course, that affects everyone in the disability community differently, but it affects so many of us. And my story is that for 15 plus years in the workforce, I had to quit gainful employment due to my chronic illnesses and conditions progressing that come with severe and debilitating pain. And I don't look disabled most of the time, but disability affects every part of my life. And the decision to leave my career as a nurse was the most difficult decision of my life, which was essentially no decision at all. I left a job that paid me good money, and now I'm barely able to work a low-paying job at 15 hours a week, but I do my very best and I do work. I had to sell my house, and I lost my life savings on medications and doctors. I went quite literally from upper middle class to just barely above the poverty line by about, a couple $100s in just under a year. And I am not alone. I had savings, lost them all. So like I said, I still work part-time from home while receiving SSDI to make ends meet, and I am on MAUD, which has allowed me to get assistance from Medicaid and from Extra Help, which is the low-income subsidy for prescription drugs, because that's my biggest cost. Without these supports, I cannot maintain a quality of life. I, like I said, drained most of my retirement savings when I was on the marketplace plans and was paying upwards of $800 to $1,000 a month out of pocket after insurance for medications alone. That continued when I got on Medicare, and that doesn't include other medical costs. So prior to having MAUD and Extra Help, I wasn't even taking all of the medications that my doctors wanted me to have, even either they weren't covered or they were too expensive after coverage. On most plans available through a spouse, that amount would exceed $2,000 a month with ease out of pocket. So if my partner and I married, I would lose my Medicaid and I would lose the Extra Help for prescription drugs via losing MAUD. Because with his income, even though he is just above the poverty line himself, being considered, we'd be above the limit for me to continue receiving MAUD and therefore also Medicaid and prescription assistance. And we have chosen to not do the risk of just doing a commitment ceremony and not getting legally married, because there is legal justification, precedent, and history of people losing these benefits simply because they appear to be married. And it's a calculated risk that some take, but we cannot take because I have very, very much to lose. Choosing between life and love is colossally unfair. And here's the thing, I know that myself and other disabled people deserve more. Our love deserves the security of a legally recognized marriage that signifies that I am more than a burden. I am a person who loves and is worthy of love, the kind whose expression is granted in full faith and credit to non-disabled Americans in every state of this country. So Josie talked about the bills. The bills in the PA House and Senate right now to reform MAUD are very important. And if they pass with the right amendments, they could change my life. And I would like to emphasize the importance of including an amendment to eliminate the individual income and asset recommendation, i.e. to count income as disabled worker plus spouse. So it's confusing to consider qualifications for MAUD based on individual, not household income, but then to judge the savings and the assets based on the household total. So if asset evaluation considers the disabled person plus a spouse or dependent, then so should income considerations. I believe this would have a benefit in both percentage of income paid for insurance premiums, and then in also allowing more people to save and accumulate assets as well as get married if they so choose. So without such measures, I have no choice but to not marry the love of my life, to never be able to publicly say we are married because of the risk of me losing all my medical benefits because of being seen as holding out as married, which is the legal term. To never be able to have a financial safety net to speak of. And, you know, we talked about being allowed to have one house. Sure, but I'm not allowed to have savings. So why would I buy a house if something in it broke? You know, I'm not allowed to have more than 10,000 in savings. And that goes fast. Believe me, I'm sure we all know who've had a car problem or have had a water problem. So there's a small percentage of the disabled population that has, you know, made it and achieved economic equality in careers. And they're a fortunate minority. The work they do is so important, but it's also important to acknowledge that such opportunities are not available to all disabled individuals. Does that make us less worthy of a culturally, societally, and spiritually embraced expression of love and marriage? So even with very accessible workplaces, many of us could still not maintain gainful employment, especially those of us with relapsing and remitting conditions or chronic and severe pain, but we still work. I still work, and we still deserve human and civil rights. So I'm going to close with asking for your support of the bills to reform MAUD, and I hope that you will also consider the large subset of disabled people who would be left behind without measures to help those of us at the lower end of the income spectrum. Thank you so much.
Oh, Caitlin, that was so well said and echoes so many of the things that we are all going through. Thank you so, so much. And I want to restate the bill that we've been talking about, MAUD, Medical Assistance for Workers with Disabilities, MAWD, Workers with Job Success, House Bill 1115, sponsored by Representative Klunk, and Senate Bill 156 by Senator Mensch. And I love the bipartisan support. I think that the employment of people with disabilities is something that every one of us, regardless of what party we land in, should support. It makes sense. Thank you, Caitlin. Okay, Mr. Matt Berwick, please share with us.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much, Josie. Good morning. As Dan said, my name is Matt Berwick, and I'm the Program Manager for Disability Accommodations and Clinical Services at UPMC in the Disabilities Resource Center. I teach psychology and sociology of disability at the University of Pittsburgh. I also serve as president of the United Spinal Association of Western PA. I'm an athlete, a collector of bow ties, a Disney fan, a person with a spinal cord injury, and a Medicaid recipient living on medical assistance for workers with disabilities. Without my Medicaid services, I wouldn't be any of these things that I just mentioned that describe me. I have a great job and a lot to offer, but I rely on these services to get out of bed, get ready, and work, which allows me to contribute and pay taxes in my community. With the current cap on MAUD, if I were to advance further in my career or teach another course, I would lose my benefits, which would impact my ability to work, live in the community, and be out and about like I am today. Disability is expensive, and programs like MAUD make managing disability expenses possible. It allows me to retain my Medicaid benefits, my home and community services, all while contributing to the cost of the program through a monthly premium. However, the cap is real, and the fear of losing these vital services is also real. With the new House and Senate bills introduced by Representative Klunk and Senator Mensch, I could continue to earn and advance in my career, pay a higher premium, and eliminate the fear of losing my services. While this story is mine, it's the same story that you will hear from every person currently on MAUD and every person wanting to work and live without fear of losing these benefits. If you want to see people like me and other members of this panel be successful, advance employment, and be active members of their community, I encourage you to support these bills and the great people with disabilities who can be your coworkers, your employees, or even your boss. Thank you for allowing me to share my story, and I really appreciate the opportunity to give you the opportunity to share more about MAUD and the Workers with Job Success that's going to be coming with these new bills. Josie?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And Matt is being extremely humble, which is very strange for him. But we're friends. I pick on him. But he is looking at more opportunities to share his knowledge with more students, to teach. And at this point is waiting for this bill to pass, along with our next speaker, to pursue these additional opportunities. We are literally waiting to pursue our dreams and our jobs for this bill. So to my friend, Miss Jessica, I would love for you to share your story.
Thank you, Josie, and Representative Miller, thank you for having us this morning. Like Josie said, and like many of my colleagues, my story is similar. I am currently a special education teacher and have been for 10 years. I love my job and I love working with my students. As a special education teacher, I know that some of my students that I am planning on transitioning to higher education and to the workforce will face many of these same issues if we do not pass this MAUD with Workers with Job Success bill. And as Matt and Caitlin, William and Josie have shared, the caps are real and the struggle is there. And I don't want my students to have to face similar struggles that I am facing. So to connect it to education and what I'm doing, part of why this bill is important to me on many levels is the education component. I am one of the only people in my school building that appears to have a disability. And without the support of this MAUD bill, I would not be able to come to work every day. I would not be able to get dressed in the morning and get the help that I need to be successful so that I can educate my students. It is important that I am in the classroom. I have a lot to offer my students, and it is important from a diversity factor. Students and people need to see people with disabilities in the community, living and achieving everything that able-bodied people are able to achieve. As far as the caps, like Matt and Josie shared, I am also just counting my pennies, which I'm sure can't be good for mental health, if I'm being honest, since this is a mental health and disability summit. I am, constantly waiting month by month to get a letter from the county assistance office to let me know if I am still disabled. I have received that letter many times. I wake up the next day, click my heels, and I'm still disabled. I need this bill passed, just like my colleagues and fellow advocates, not only for me, but for my students. My students are capable. People in the community need to see people with disabilities, all kinds of diversity, in order to move this world forward in unity and in inclusion. I encourage you to support this bill, and I thank you for allowing us to share the story.
Thank you so much, Jess. I think you brought up so well the fact that mental health is a piece of all of this. We know that people who are employed have a less likelihood of needing mental health services. It doesn't mean it gets rid of our disability, but we do know that sitting at home, social isolation, whether it be because of COVID or not being able to pursue a job, adds to the mental health crisis. And we need to be addressing that throughout all of this. I'm going to now go back to my friend Will to talk about what this means for the diverse populations. We know that people with disabilities were the first to get laid off when the pandemic started, and are being the first to be hired back. But this is also multiplied when you add other layers of diversity onto it. So, Will?
Thank you, Josie or Dr. Badger. All right. So, so like I echoed earlier, like I said earlier, it goes without saying that MAUD is not very recognized in the diverse populations, or even with the county assistance offices. They're not very educated when it comes to the medical assistance with workers with disabilities. Again, it is the least used public assistance service in the Commonwealth, due to myths and stigma around using MAUD. There is a good majority or minority of Hispanics in my community, at least in North Philadelphia, where employment is not encouraged, where due to losing their public benefits, but most importantly, like I said earlier, the Medicaid program, the Medicaid service. You know, we do have a good community within Pennsylvania who also uses home-based community in-home community based supports in the Commonwealth. And so that being said, the issues go a lot deeper when it comes to the Hispanic population. The Hispanic population does not believe, again, that they could be employed, let me put it that way, due to, again, the public benefits. But let me connect the dots for you. It's not the income is the issue when it comes to MAUD only. It's also the resources, like Dr. Badger said earlier. It's the buying a house, it's the car, it's all that whole aspect. It's like Jessica or Caitlin said earlier, that if they buy a house, how can they maintain a house if they have no savings? You know, MAUD will allow people to do that. You know, MAUD would allow people to it will open doors for many Pennsylvanians. Okay, when we talk about MAUD, right, though, the eligibility criteria specifically, it says that you must have a disability that meets the Social Security Administration standards. Disabilities might include physical or developmental disabilities, mental health, or intellectual disabilities. SSA income standards are not used. Let me put that in perspective for you when it comes to MAUD, though. MAUD's Social Security definition, the Social Security definition is a very broad definition. It doesn't specify specific disabilities. That being said, that anyone that might be considered to have a disability under Social Security is eligible for MAUD when it comes to disability. Anyone who has chronic asthma, okay? Anyone who also has rheumatoid arthritis that makes it so debilitating for them to be able to work a regular job, but at the same time makes it able for them to work a job. These are disabilities that do qualify under MAUD. So as we look into, we all look into MAUD, I want to remind everyone that the MAUD eligibility criteria, as limited as it is, there is a little bit of a broadness to it when we talk about disability, how we can how MAUD allows anyone anyone who has a disability to work, but again, it restrains them when it comes to income.
Thank you so much, Will. Okay, so wrapping this up, friends, we need to move this, and we need to move this now. And we need your help. We need to make sure that people across Pennsylvania not only know about MAUD, but have access to this new category, to workers with job success. We need you to help us move this bill forward. And so we ask you to tell your friends. You know, you guys know some good people. Talk to your friends, support it, even though they've both been released as bills. Sign on as supporters. contact Representative Rapp, or now the bill is in the Senate Appropriations Committee, so Senator Brown. We need to move this so that all Pennsylvanians with disabilities have the right and the ability to pursue their maximum potential. And as you look around here, I'm sure you can see the mass knowledge and strength of these advocates, and why we should be able to contribute fully to society. And I want to thank Dan Miller so much for having us. So Dan, the show is yours.
Well, thank you, Josie, and thank you everybody for your testifying here today. Thank you for sharing some personal stories. In particular, I will tell you, all of you were compelling. I would note, and I'm sure you wouldn't mind me sharing, how much Representative Piscatano and I were commenting on Caitlin, in particular with some of her impactful words. So I'm going to ask, I do want to, first I want to just remind our members, if you have questions, please let me know, raising your hand or chat or somewhere, or even text, right, I think. So please let me know, and I'd love to include you. I do want to also mention the members who have joined us since we began. So just really quick forward, I want to thank Representative Wheatley, Innamorato, Kulik, Howard, Cephas, Gainey, Bullock, Kirkland, Deloso, Williams. I think that might have been everybody there. So that was another 10 who joined us during that time. And we'll take a look to see if I missed anybody else. But I want to thank everybody for for jumping in when I know it's
Brett Miller, you went on mute.
Brett Miller, you went on mute.
That's odd. Go figure. My computer heard enough from me. So the bill that you guys have referenced obviously has been is a good step forward. There's no doubt about it. So we're hoping to see that big support. I'd be interested too if Senator Fontana has any thoughts as to how things might be progressing or discussions in the Senate. That being said, before I move to anyone else, I did want to just kind of reference maybe, Josie, some thoughts as to even how the bill could perhaps be better, right? So one of the concerns that I know you and I have had some discussions on is in relation to other states and some of the more expansive roles that they have taken as far as improving things for people with disabilities who actually have a job, right? Which, as you referenced, so many do not, right? So, and in particular, my thought is along making sure that spousal income and assets are not factored in when determining eligibility. So I wonder if you or anybody can give some thoughts as to what type of change that would make and making sure that that is not the case.
Okay.
When it comes to that. So go ahead.
Absolutely. So the system's tricky. I think you guys all know that. And so this bill, as it is currently written, what it would do is add this category. Okay, and that is, we want to keep this bill pretty clean because this is important to add this workers with job success. As it is written right now, it would allow people to join this workers with job success category, including their spouse's income, which for this specific piece is important because it will allow people to enter the category as a married couple because, the worker with a disability has to be on this new category to be able to earn and save. Okay, so that part of our bill is great. However, getting onto MOD in the very first place is where there's an issue. And that is where there should be a change. We should be thinking and looking at being able to allow any person with a disability who is a worker to be able to join MOD. And that would be ideally just based on the individual. So let me recap. If we are going to go in and change the entire mod system, then I would highly recommend that we have a bill that states that it's solely based on the worker with the disability. Many other states, I think it's like 15, have done that, where the income and asset limits are disregarded for the spouse. However, that I believe is going to be another bill. What needs to happen further is ideally more people can get into this new category so that when they get married, they no longer have to be worried about their spouse earning money, so that they don't have to worry about having $10,001 in their account, which if you're looking at a family, if you're looking at kids, that goes away pretty quick. So I would ask you to be thinking about some ways to make sure more people can enter this job category. We're not talking about people who are just getting mod because they don't have to get insurance and pay for it. We pay for mod, and if we are in this new category, we pay a higher premium. But this is allowing people to work and to pay into the system. And ultimately, I think at the end of the day, is cost neutral. I know that there's a fiscal note, but at the end of the day, I think it's actually neutral.
And I'll remind members just to please let me know if you have some questions. The thing with that though, and Josie, this is a fantastic bill, obviously that needs to work, but you did reference the higher premium that is embedded for this category. And if I recall with it too, if you are a couple that makes, I don't know, maybe combined, you have $50,000 jobs, and you're at 100, 105, 110, you could bump into that to a cliff anyhow, right?
Okay, this is what's get so tricky. By federal law, once you hit this certain limit, which currently is about $110,000 a year, you end up by federal law being required to pay the state premium, which right now is about $10,000 per year. Now we know that that amount only covers the worker with the disability. So it could be up to like 10% of that person's earned income. But as you said, Dan, that considers both of the whole family's income. So you could hit it faster. And that's not necessarily something we can change. What would be different eventually is by eliminating these household income to the entire mod system.
Well, look, I want to thank you not only for your good answer, but for you being able to fight off the dog while you gave the answer. I mean, that takes skill.
It's definitely one of those new job work risks these days.
I thought you did great. Well, and back to the point though, with it, I know you said the 10,000. Of course, the challenge would be that if both people in the couple were in the program, then the 10,000 would become 20,000, which is a heck of a lot of a hit. So even though you may be making 110, which could be a fair wage in many areas with it, the 20,000 right off the top would obviously not be so helpful. And I do think that there are some other states that have found the ways to be more helpful in that regard. I think it all depends on what we're trying to do. So, what is the best way when we're supposedly trying to get more people with disabilities into the workforce? What is the best way? Well, the best way probably is to stop penalizing them. And I if I can too, I did get a questionnaire back with a little bit, and maybe this might go to Caitlin. But again, to just kind of be clear, if you can, Caitlin, with it, I know you gave some information regarding the marriage, how it impacts marital decisions. So I'm wondering, so the question was, can you go back and sort of clarify what factors that come in and exactly, again, sort of what happens if you make that decision, what you're risking.
Yeah, so for me, if I made the decision now with the bill as it stands, I would be over the income limit currently, and over from my own savings potentially, not now, but if potentially in the future, we wouldn't be able to save. We'd have to make sure to not, even if we could, which we can't right now, but if we could in the future. With the bill amended to create this new category, I would be able to, with the income of a spouse, be in this new category, which would, of course, increase the premium paid, which is only fair, and for insurance and health insurance. And it would also allow my spouse to save and my spouse to make more money if this new category were created. However, if this new category were created and it only considered individual income, I would not be able to get married, because I, on my own, even though I work, even though I, continue to contribute to the best of my ability, would not be able to get into this category, and therefore would not be able to have the protections that it affords, therefore would not be able to get married. So if it considered the income of the disabled worker plus the spouse or dependent as qualifying conditions for this new category, and just as it currently judges savings as the person with the disability plus the spouse or dependent, which that makes it a little more clear, as opposed to judging one category as the individual and one category as the household. That would allow more people to get married if they choose. It would allow more people to save and accumulate assets. Obviously, I'm never gonna be Jeff Bezos. I'm never going to have, unlimited assets. And of course, insurance would still be difficult to afford, because it would be considered, my premiums would be considered based on both of our incomes. But, that's the way we need to do it right now, because as Josie said, that's considered, that bumps you into federal law territory. But right now, I think the best we can do with this bill is to include the amendment to eliminate the individual income and asset recommendation, essentially to count income as disabled worker plus spouse. But like she was saying with the other states' programs, all of it should not consider spousal income. That would be the ideal bill, but it would also afford them protections of being able to have, to get married and have a spouse save money, and to not be like, well, by getting married to me, you're taking on the burden of never being able to save money. That's super. Like, no one wants to do that. So the ideal bill would be, in states like Massachusetts, Wyoming, Washington, Arizona, they have a lot of their mod equivalents don't consider spousal income. There's a total, I believe, right now of 15 states that don't consider spousal income, but the states I just mentioned are the ones I believe that are doing it the best and are protecting people with disabilities the most, who are workers.
Well, and thank you, Caitlin. And not seeing further questions with it, let me first, and I'm sorry, I want to reference, we were joined by Representative Friel-Otten, Representative Herron, and Representative Zabel as well. So thank you to them for joining us. Before we transition to the next thing, so I'm going to ask the county public defenders to get themselves settled on that. Again, I want to thank on behalf, I know, of the chair of the good chairman Ryan Bizzarro. I want to thank everybody for your great testimony and the materials that you provided us. Look, I'm going to seek to amend this bill. Okay, so there's no secret to it. I very much appreciate your all work in getting it to this point, and it is no doubt that it is a good step forward. But I admit to you, I'm not, you know, and I don't think you are either in some ways. I'm not satisfied, right? And I'm not satisfied with Pennsylvania not being in that list that you have given us, right? So, and unfortunately, in too many ways, Pennsylvania has not led as it used to. It has not led in the relation of supports, disability-based supports. Our rose has lost its bloom in that regard. While I definitely hope for this Maud bill to pass, there's no doubt about it. I know it has my support. I'm sure everybody who's here today. I cannot let it slide by without ignoring some of the other things that it doesn't do, the things that it should change, and how it should be better for people. And Pennsylvania has the same right as the people in Wyoming to marry when they want to marry, okay, and not risk it all in the process of that. We got to find ways to encourage all your abilities to be of use, and not tell you, well, I'm sorry, you're earning too much now, right? And look, I have no problem, Caitlin, if you did, no offense to your partner, if you did marry Jeff Bezos, all right, God bless, all right? I admit to you, I'm going to not worry so much about your financial issues. But even $110,000 a year for a couple, let alone a couple with a child or more with it, that still is an issue when you give them a $20,000 bill. And that still is a problem. That's still not good enough. And Pennsylvania should be looking for more. So I want to thank you all for your testimony. Josie, as always, thank you for putting it together. Caitlin, did I cut you off for a quick second? You're right. All right. So thank you for everybody for your presentation. We're going to pause for a quick moment and make sure our next panelists are joining us. So thank you again, and we'll be right with y'all in just a moment. All right, and while we're putting everybody on, and I definitely yes, Rebecca, thank you for your PowerPoint. By all means, we're going to move into the second topic here that we had, and this came out of some conversations that I had as well with Representative Summer Lee, as well as my friend Representative Zabel. One of my concerns and our shared concerns is that we know that currently in Pennsylvania, a child as young as 10 can be arrested, adjudicated, and if need be, placed into a delinquency placement of some type for some period of time. And obviously in juvenile, there actually is no set limits on probation or anything else. But you could be in there during that process. When you have challenges, you can be what they would call FTA'd, meaning you could be kicked out. And then what they often do is ramp you into different placements. One of the growing issues that we've identified has been the challenges with meeting educational needs and disability needs, as well as mental health. So for those children. So that includes, in this regard, a child coming into the delinquency system with an IEP, or a child in the delinquency system who needs an IEP, right? And what we can do better to support those children and those who are doing their best to represent their needs. In that outreach, I'm very glad to have touched base actually with some of my former colleagues at the Allegheny County Public Defender's Office. So I want to thank their leadership, including the county executive, for making them available, as well as their interest in joining us today. So they have with us 3 presenters who are going to be talking to us about what they are seeing, what they are doing to help children in delinquency in relation to educational needs with an IEP. So I'm very glad to have them here. First, just really brief, Rebecca Hudak has served as Deputy Director of the Juvenile Division of Allegheny County PD since November 2015. In this capacity, she is responsible for supervising 10 juvenile defenders who represent delinquent youth in all phases of the court process, from detention hearings to probation violations. In February 21, the division expanded their services to include educational advocacy. She grew up in Mifflinburg. She attended the University of Pittsburgh and graduated from Loyola School of Law. She served as assistant PD in Union County before moving over to Allegheny, and she's a member of she's a board member of the Juvenile Defenders Association, and a member of the State Council for Interstate Juvenile Supervision, and a friend who I worked with, so I'm very glad that she's able to be here today. Christine Porter is a new education attorney for the Juvenile Division of the Allegheny County PDs. Prior to joining the PD's office in 21, she practiced educational law with a private firm in Seattle, where she represented students with disabilities and their families. She's also practiced disability and elder law with the Neighborhood Legal Services in Pittsburgh, and litigated employment discrimination cases as a partner with a small plaintiff side firm in Seattle. She received her MA in philosophy and a JD from the University of Washington. Thank you, Christine, for being here. And Laura McWilliams began working with the Allegheny County PD's office in 2013. She's currently a managing attorney working out of the Juvenile Division, where she advocates for using a holistic approach toward representation in order to improve case outcomes, as well as enhance procedural justice and move clients forward in their lives. She grew up in Michigan, attended Wayne State University, and later graduated from Suffolk in Boston Law School. While attending law school, she worked as an advocate for survivors of domestic violence. So again, I want to thank all three of you for being here today with this information. I'll remind members, if you can, please be sure to let me know that you have a question. And I thank all members for their time today. And I'm going to kick it over to Becky.
Thank you so much, Dan, for that introduction and for having us here. I'm just going to sort of jump right into this because I hopefully can get everything to move. Okay, so just as a basic primer on education and what we're talking about are how kids interact with the delinquency system, with the dependency system, what that's like. So essentially, in Allegheny County and across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, kids' behaviors are addressed in two main systems. That's the dependency system, where the driver of services is the Office of Children, Youth, and Families, or the delinquency system, where the driver of behaviors for kids is the juvenile probation side. So here in Allegheny County, if you are a dependent child, there's a lot of access to educational resources. Some of those resources are within the Office of Children, Youth, and Families themselves, where they actually employ education advocates. And also here in Allegheny County, we have a wonderful organization called Kids Voice that has an entire education department where they're able to support kids within the dependency system. Historically in Allegheny County, on the delinquency side, there are very few supports for education needs. And so this is in part what our office has been trying to address. I would like to just stop and say, this is Allegheny County. I'm from Central Pennsylvania. I'm very tied into their legal systems there. By and large, if you're a dependent child in most of the counties in Pennsylvania, there are not additional education resources built into the dependency system. So we are very lucky to have that even here in Allegheny County. So why do kids end up in the delinquency system instead of the dependency system? In part, it's because on the delinquency side, kids can be held accountable or be punished for their behaviors. So some of the things that we can use on the delinquency side that cannot be used on the dependency side are secure detention, and also restrictive intermediate punishment, which is also known as the house arrest monitor. So that's why, in part, some schools like to push kids towards the delinquency side instead of the support side and the dependency side. So as Dr. Badger sort of mentioned in the last panel, we're talking about levels of diversity, right? So the Black Girls Equity Alliance did a really amazing study last September and released some, what was shocking to some people, not to us here in the Public Defender Office, but very sad data that first and foremost, the largest referrer of kids into the Allegheny County juvenile justice system is the City of Pittsburgh Public Schools. They refer even more kids to the juvenile justice system than the Philadelphia Public Schools. Additionally, we know that Black kids are more likely to be referred to juvenile justice than white kids are. So on top of that, the next level of diversity we have are those with disabilities. there is currently no collection of data in terms of disabilities system-wide in Allegheny County. So what we did within our own office was used first quarter data, and we found that 42% of kids in the first quarter of 2020 had an IEP. More disturbing than the 42%, which is bad enough, is that at least 10% more likely should have an IEP, as evidenced by the behaviors that the probation office is reporting and their mental health history. So those are some of the numbers that we were dealing with and that we were seeing the problems regarding.
All right, so as Becky noted, the numbers show us that students with disabilities are at a higher risk for contact with the delinquency system. But at the same time, our office is seeing a number of clients who have behavioral challenges at school, but are not receiving any significant behavior support at school. For example, as Becky pointed out, we do see students who were referred for school-based offenses who may have other red flags of possible disability, like years of failing grades, but were never evaluated under either the IDEA or Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And we also see, commonly see IEPs for students who have behavioral challenges at school that have no positive behavior support plan, no behavior goals, so there's no way to track the behavioral progress of that student. On this slide, there's an image from part of an IEP for a student who was categorized under emotional disturbance, largely because of his behavior. And despite that, when it got to the question, does the student exhibit behaviors that impede his or her learning or that of others, the IEP team checked no. And this is not uncommon. And had the team, from what we see in the office, and had the team checked yes, they would have needed to develop a positive behavior support plan for this student. And presumably a good plan would have helped to reduce or eliminate those targeted challenging behaviors and increase replacement behavior. But that was not done here. So next slide. And with so many students not receiving these behavioral interventions and supports that they need at school, it's no wonder that school employees without the resources or training to support students with disabilities are instead referring students, with some of those students ending up in the juvenile justice system for behavior at school that's directly related to their disabilities. And we have some quotes here on this slide from a public source article called Failing the Future. And there's a quote here about elementary students and Montour School District having access to a Lego makerspace and all of these great resources. And then a Stowe Rocks principal quoted as saying, they just hope a computer turns on when they start it up in the morning. So many districts are apparently struggling to find the resources to provide the kind of high quality behavioral services that some students need. For example, to have a board certified behavior analyst come in to provide behavior coaching, or to set up trauma-informed mental health supports that truly match the needs of those students. But districts need the resources to be proactive and not reactive about challenging behaviors that students may have at school. And when students are displaying these behaviors, teachers need better options. Next slide, please.
Okay, so this is a story of a kid with a disability and how she ended up in the juvenile system. So there's two ways you can end up with in the delinquency court system. Either you're charged by police with a community-based crime, or you do something in school and the school refers you to the juvenile court system. And that's called a delinquency petition. And that's how a kid can get in trouble and end up in the courts for it. And it is absolutely the school's choice, for the most part, not always, but for the most part, about how they're going to handle an incident in school. So this, what you're looking at here, the picture there is a still image from a video in a high school, an alternative school. It's called Clayton Academy in Pittsburgh Public Schools. And what you're looking at actually are two girls who are being restrained by school officials right now. If you look at the green line, the green paint line on the front wall, that is a child pressed up against the wall. That is not my client. My client is, you can't see her, she's behind that group of adults standing a little bit farther back. So this is a girl who, she was 14 years old. She'd been struggling with a lot of issues in school. I don't remember her specific issues, but her behaviors were declining as she got older. She had trouble sitting still in the classroom. She had trouble focusing. She had trouble keeping up with the work. Her mom had been requesting an IEP. I'm not sure if her mom didn't use the magic words, didn't sign the form, the school was dragging their feet, or I'm not 100% sure what happened, but at this point, she did not have an IEP. So instead of putting behavioral supports in place for her actually diagnosed mental health issues, they put her in this alternative school. And this incident started, she was charged with misdemeanor disorderly conduct, which is basically doing something in public that annoys other people, basically. How this started was, well, so let me just say my first interaction with this girl, I hadn't seen the video. I met with the girl and her mom, and her mom did most of the talking. Her mom said, my daughter didn't do anything wrong. She's the victim in this. She's not taking any pleas. We're going to trial on this. We're fighting this. She didn't do anything wrong. They will not stop putting their hands on her. And so then I get the video and I see the video, and her mom is absolutely right that this girl didn't do anything wrong to cause this. The story is they were leaving the classroom. They're walking to the cafeteria. This girl, the rule is you have to walk in a line with your hands at your sides. If you deviate from that, you get in trouble. She started bouncing a little bit. A teacher came up to her and kind of got in her face. She raised her hands up. At Clayton Academy, the teachers are taught that that is a threat, and that is an excuse to restrain a child. If a kid is a danger to themselves or to others, they can be restrained. And what you're reading here is the transcript from the trial, where the teacher actually testified that the fact that she put her hands up made her a threat, and she was restrained. Some other kids jumped in to try to help her, and they also got restrained. So in total, there were 3 girls who were restrained against the walls. My client was charged with a misdemeanor and sent to juvenile court. The girl with her face over the green line was charged with a summary offense, which resulted probably in community service and no supervision. And the 3rd girl did not face any charges at all. So the school will pretend that they have choice, or they have no choice in filing charges, but they absolutely can choose what to do with these situations. And my client ended up on supervision for a year. She was on an ankle monitor for almost that entire time. And for a kid who needs to move, like needs to bounce, needs to move, being stuck in her house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This was pre-COVID, but she ended up doing cyber school because she kept getting in trouble at school. It was really hard for her, and she just barely got through that supervision because she continued to have school-based offenses. She eventually got her IEP through the help of the Student Disability Advocacy Project, which is a program in Pittsburgh. She did get her IEP. She's doing well now. Her case is closed, but she almost did not make it through. And so that's a way that a kid can get into the system through a school-based offense. Okay. So I'm going to talk about this. This is just another kid with a school-based offense. This is a kid who was.
I can do it. Yeah.
Okay,
sorry.
go ahead.
I love the mutes and unmutes. Okay. So the young lady was a wonderful example of that 10% of kids that come into the system, and clearly through their behaviors and their former diagnoses that actually exist and are floating around out there should have had an IEP. This is an example of a young person who came to our system who already had an IEP, who already had the identified disability. As you can see, we have his diagnoses, and he had a very clear IEP that addressed a lot of his behaviors. One of his triggers is that when frustrated or feeling attacked, he reacts verbally and can say some very aggressive things. So as you can see highlighted in yellow, what essentially happened was this young man was being bullied in school by a group of other students who, because he was different, chose to tell him they were discussing him in other classes and that he was identified by the group of kids as the next school shooter. And so when they confronted this young man with the fact that everybody in the school was talking about him for being different and acting differently, instead of walking away or handling it like a fully functioning adult, he said, "I'm not now, but I'm on the verge of shooting up the school." So what followed was the kids all just left to get on their school buses. A teacher approached the young man. They told him that it's not appropriate to respond in such a way. And although he was never suspended or put on any other type of internal discipline, they immediately filed charges for misdemeanor terroristic threats. Because of this charge, he was put on homebound restrictions and ultimately had to go to trial. So this is another, this is a different example of someone that, although there are supports in place, there are identifications in place, schools are still choosing to file criminal charges than deal with the matters in school.
Okay, so here's why this matters, because for schools that have a kid with a disability, one of the easiest ways to get rid of the problem is to file charges against them. Because once a kid is under supervision, then they have a school, usually a school-based probation officer. They have a judge who's keeping that kid's behavior under a microscope. What you're looking at here with the highlights is actual examples of like actual court orders. Those aren't my typos, those are the judge's typos. Just want to throw that out there. Some judges are are less tolerant than others of school absences. Most judges require good school attendance. Some judges require perfect school attendance and perfect class attendance, as well as good grades. And so once a kid has been put on supervision, it is really easy for the school to just call the probation officer when something goes wrong. Kids in the juvenile system have regular reviews in front of their judge, but also some judges will issue a standing court order that if a kid misses a day of school without a doctor's note, that kid is to be picked up, taken to a juvenile detention center and held there until he or she can see his judge. And that's usually 1 to 2 weeks before they can see their judge. That is very traumatic for any child, especially a kid with a disability. The other thing about kids with disabilities that has become really clear to me is a lot of kids with mental health issues self-medicate with marijuana. And so that is absolutely a violation of juvenile probation. And a lot of these kids, they're young, so they're still dealing with figuring out medication and getting accurate diagnoses and side effects and all sorts of things. And as soon as they test positive for marijuana, they can be brought back in front of their judge and they can be punished. And the responses increase the more times they violate that court order. So I've absolutely had kids picked up for missing one class or one day of school without a doctor's note. It absolutely happens. Okay, I was trying to save my time for this slide. Okay, so the reason why all that matters is because the more a kid messes up on his probation, the more likely it is that he will be taken out of his home and placed in a facility, a juvenile placement, a delinquency placement. And that facility, the way I describe it to parents is it's a place for kids who get in trouble to go and get what we call treatment and rehabilitation. In Pennsylvania, we have 2 different types of placements. There are private placements and then there are state-run facilities. The private placements do not have to accept any child they don't want to accept. They can reject a child. They usually don't until a kid has escalated to the point where this kid is likely not to be not to successfully complete the program. And that means they've had previous failures at other placements because now they're looking at losing money. They bring in a kid with a disability. It's really hard to address and it costs them a lot of money and the kid stays there and doesn't do well and gets kicked out. And so private placements generally after a certain period of time will not accept certain kids who've shown non-compliance in placement. What you're looking at here is this, I'm going to play this video in a minute. This is a state-run facility. So this kid gave us permission to show this video. You can't see his face. I'm not going to give you any specific identifying information about him, but this kid is in a state-run secure facility because no other placement will accept him. He has significant mental health needs. He's a really neat kid. He's super smart. He's like really interesting, really smart, has a lot of goals in his life, but has these significant mental health needs as well as a lot of trauma in his history that makes it really hard for him at times to control his behavior. And he becomes aggressive, or now he's just gotten a reputation for being aggressive. So staff respond to him as if he's going to become aggressive. So what happened in this video, it started with school refusal. He's sitting in a classroom refusing to do work. So the staff moves him to what they call a therapeutic workstation. You can see it right there. It's a desk. The kids call it the desk chair. He's sitting in the desk. So they put him in the desk. They separate him from the other kids. And he tries to put his head down. So they're like, you can't put your head down. That's against the rules. They bring in a chair they remove the desk. They bring in a chair without a desk. And then there's a fight over the mask. And then this is and pay attention to the guy in the red mask and where his mask is during all of this while this plays. Because you can see his nose. I'm just gonna throw that out there. So right now, I think there's some swearing going on, I believe, on the part of the young child, the teenage boy. And now there's the fight over the mask, whether he's going to keep it up or down. All right, so they eventually get him to the ground and they sit on him for an hour. His restraint lasts almost an entire hour. This is something that we've seen in these state-run facilities a number of times. The restraints escalate. I hope this was as offensive to you as it is to us. What you could see is they're trying to get him down on the ground. And for anyone who knows anything about trauma knows that being in a flat on the ground with people on top of you is is the most vulnerable position you could be in. And so he's refusing to let them do that to him, but also they're restraining him because his mask wasn't up. They were more than 6 feet away from him. They could have left it alone. They chose not to. They chose to turn it into a power struggle, and then they restrained him. And the rules for restraints are you can only restrain a kid if he's a danger to himself or others. And that simply does not exist in this video. He was not a threat. He might have been swearing, he might have been yelling, but he wasn't doing anything to threaten anyone. The thing that's important about this, well, there's two things that are important about this. The first thing is this facility is not equipped to deal with kids with these kinds of issues, and they know it, but there's nothing they can do about it. They don't have the treatment resources for a kid like this with this kind of significant mental health issues. School refusal is part of his diagnosis, like part of what's going on with him, but he also has a lot of trauma and a lot of anger and a lot of stuff related to his emotional state. The other thing is we can watch this video and you can see it's from just October. There's nothing we can do about this. So we know this is happening to this child. There's nowhere else to send this child. And so we are witnesses to some really awful things, traumatic things that are compounding this child's trauma. And there's nothing we can do about it because there's nowhere else that will take this kid because of his history and because of his aggression. So even though where he is not equipped to meet his needs, there is nowhere that will accept him that can meet his needs because none of the private placements will accept him.
So this is just a reminder that this slide is just a reminder that when we're thinking about the education of students with disabilities in these placements, that they're still fully entitled to a free and appropriate public education while they're placed in a juvenile justice facility under the IDEA, and also to FAPE under Section 504. So although they don't lose their rights under the IDEA while they're in the juvenile justice placement, we do see similar problems arise again and again. And I'll just really quickly point out some of these more common issues. So for special education, although we know that youth entering the placements who are on IEPs have to be provided with comparable services to what was on their entering IEPs, that often does not happen. We see amending of IEPs or development of new IEPs that reflect what's administratively convenient or readily available rather than what that student needs. So for example, their IEPs rarely, if ever, contain related services or autistic support services, speech therapy, things like that. We often see minimal kind of cookie cutter transition plans, students not being educated in the least restrictive environment, minimal progress monitoring in some placements. So it's hard to tell if students are making progress on their goals. And of course, as we just saw, the overuse of restraint, which is an issue for students, both with and without disabilities. So next slide. And then, we also see, we know from the research that youth and juvenile justice system are one of the most educationally at-risk populations. And there's research that shows that nearly half of the students nationwide who enter into the placements are below grade level in both reading and math. And then with each successive school move, students lose months of academic progress. So here what we see are students moving from detention to juvenile justice placement and then back to their home schools with these little pieces of credits that they accumulate along the way. And sometimes those just don't add up for students, or they're in the wrong courses. So they find out that they're not on track for graduation. And there can be an issue also with students who are in placements over the summer. Some placements don't offer credit recovery programs or summer school options, that the same ones that the students might receive were they back in their home schools. So they get further behind than they would have been had they been educated in their home schools. And then sometimes a placement will report that a student needs to stay longer to finish pieces of those credits, and a judge may order the student to stay longer in a placement for that reason alone. Otherwise, they would have gone home earlier. Next slide.
So another of the issues that we see frequently in juvenile justice is the difficulties involving re-enrollment of a child back into their community-based schools. So first and foremost, districts cannot legally refuse to enroll a child based on their delinquency record, but what they do often is so similar to actual refusal that it's almost magical. So some of the barriers that we frequently see are for schools requesting documentation that are beyond the 4 in the door requirements of re-enrollment. So we will see districts asking for original birth certificates, notarized forms, full transcripts from prior education placements. And so for a lot of our kids, they're not just coming from their community-based school to a placement back to community-based school. That's the most simple form of transitioning, and that's rarely what we get. It's usually placement school, multiple community-based schools, and so transcripts can come from any number of places. We have experienced in the past kids coming out of placement and not being able to re-enroll for months at a time because of a combination of fictitious barriers that schools are throwing up to having our kids enrolled. Schools also will frequently try to immediately place one of our kiddos in an alternative education program, which is illegal unless they had been expelled prior to going to placement. But that is not uncommon for our kiddos coming out of placement. And then another thing that goes on, especially in Allegheny County, is the over-reliance on probation for discipline and behavior problems upon re-enrollment. So that re-enrollment period is, the transition period is just really stressful for everybody involved, from the child who is going from a very structured environment back into the home community. And within juvenile justice, while we might have been providing services to this child, we're not providing comparable services to the parents, to the family members, and to the community. So while we might have worked with a child on how to change their thinking process, no one's tried to work on that with mom. So it's a really vulnerable time, and schools over-rely on probation officers to address school-based behaviors. So all of these things frustrate me as an educated professional, and certainly really throw our parents and our kiddos for a loop when they're coming out of placement. So, apologize for breathing deeply. So, for years, since my taking over the juvenile division, these things were like blatantly obvious to anybody that even dipped their toe into the world of juvenile justice. We frequently saw these problems occurring, but we didn't have the know-how or the experience or the time to even begin to address these issues. So it first started with a partnership with the Student Disability Advocacy Program run by Jeff Reuter here in Pittsburgh. And that began pre-pandemic. He was able to come into our office, educate our intake division about what special education issues our intake people should be looking for, so that our attorneys could immediately start attempting to address the problem. And then it allowed us to refer our clients and their families out to the Student Disability Advocacy Project for representation regarding IEPs and other special education issues to them. And it was successful to a point, but like all things, capacity was limited. And frequently in juvenile justice, we need to move on these issues immediately, right? Because the probation officers are ready to implement discipline and accountability and punishment immediately. So we needed to move faster. My deputy director, Matt Dugan, along with the wonderful people at the Heinz Endowment, were kind enough and wonderful enough and motivated enough to believe in this project, to understand that like the work really needed to be done. And they were able to fund not only Christine's position, but another education advocate within our office. So if a kiddo and a family are coming in to talk about their delinquency charges, we are able to immediately meet their needs in-house with all of their education projects. So that was certainly only due to the beneficence of the Heinz Endowment. But it's in the beginning stages of it. We're already seeing successes, and we're absolutely already seeing a need beyond our own public defender clients. We're getting referrals for non-clients, and we're getting referrals from people within the mental health community that are working with kiddos in public education and saying like, hey, my kid's not even involved in juvenile justice, but they need education support. Can you do this for us? So we definitely know there's a need, and through Heinz, we were able to fill it for right now. So with that, I would turn it back over to Dan.
Thank you. You know, and I appreciate you talking about a couple things in the past, but while we're waiting to see some questions from members, I would note though that I got to give you and Matt Dugan a lot of credit. So when I was a public defender, we were specifically told that these issues were out of our representation. So that's what we were told. It wasn't like, hey, we don't have enough people. It was like, no, you're not doing it anyhow, right? So that was the direction we were given. So I very much appreciate that. You and Matt and your team over there have come up with a more, I think, said holistic, but expansive view of looking at these problems. And again, I'll just double check for a quick second here, and again ask members. And I want to also recognize Representative Mary Jo Daly for joining us. Thank you as well for joining us here. So, but look, you guys went over a lot of things here for it. There's no doubt that there's a lot of questions that come up. And your video, Laura, was damning. There's no doubt about that. So I guess the key thing, first that comes up is, look, all those private contractors are contractors, right? So, I guess knowing that that's how the system works, I think that part of it too is looking at what are the contractual requirements that they are supposed to meet, right? Or what should they meet? And what are some of the, better practices that they should be doing? And I don't mean restraint-based. I just mean when it comes to supporting services. So I wonder if you guys perhaps could go a little bit into some of your either concerns on that or some of your ideas for that, or any thoughts that you may have.
Yeah, so obviously I'm not holding the pocketbook, but I've frequently been involved in conversations where we know these private, to send a kid to placement can cost anywhere from $250 a day up to $550 a day. It is an expensive, massively expensive undertaking. I understand that. And yes, I am asking for more money to go to these placements so that they can expand special education services. I think if you're going to create the trauma where you remove a child from their home, then you should be providing them with top-notch level education and mental health support, period. I think one of the ways without, asking for more money, because I understand how unrealistic it is what I'm seeing some of our judges doing, are ordering the placements to contract with outside services, service providers that are outside of the physical location of the facility to provide the extra level of supports that these kids need. And of course, that the cost of that comes back to the county. And I know at least in Allegheny County, we're willing to pay it, and we have paid it. But more money. Specifically though, can I just say for the state-run facilities, is the state-run facilities are becoming a dumping ground for mental health kiddos, for high-level kiddos. And it's not unlike our local jails and our prisons where there are no mental health services. So our jails are the biggest mental health providers. Our prisons are the biggest mental health providers. The same is going on in juvenile justice. And so if you look at the training and the experience of the direct care workers at state facilities, they're not coming with specialized backgrounds to deal with high-level mental health kids. They're coming from criminal justice backgrounds, and it's not unlike those that are becoming corrections officers. So within the things that the state can control, you need to expand the mental health services and trauma-informed care in the state-run programs.
How involved are you seeing the home school districts? Beck, we can't hear you.
So the home school districts, I guess, are a mixed bag. So for a public defender office to represent adults, we have to income qualify them. For kids, we represent all kids regardless of their parents' income. So all kids are indigent. Certainly the most contact that we have with our kiddos are for the Pittsburgh Public Schools and for the classically underfunded school districts in Allegheny County. And the support services that they're providing our mental health kiddos, our special needs kiddos, is lacking, in large part because they are not funded. And they cannot provide the supports. I mean, when you have Stowe Rocks, who had to crowdfund for paper right before the pandemic, if you think any of our clients that are going there are getting top-notch mental health services, emotional support services, learning support services. They absolutely are not. I know a lot of the resistance for the community-based schools for not providing these services is because they don't have the money to spend on these kids.
No, and I don't mind asking the questions, members, but by all means, you're welcome to ask them if you want. I had mentioned FTA in the beginning, so somebody was asking, what is it? And then we'll go to Senator Fontana. But what is an FTA and how is it being used for in relation to kids with disabilities?
Laura, you can go ahead.
Okay, so an FTA is failure to adjust. It's when a kid's in a placement and they're not succeeding in the placement. So they go in front of their judge and their judge removes them from that facility and puts them in another facility. Kids with disabilities, the way we see it a lot is it drags out. So they'll go to this private placement. They'll be there failing for months, weeks, months, until the facility is finally like, you know what, we can't handle this kid. We can't. And so now we've lost 5, 6, 8, 10 months of a child's teenage years to a facility that ended up further traumatizing them because they did not get the services they needed and actually were subjected to some treatment that might have been harmful to them. So an FTA is failure to adjust. They get moved to a new facility. When they go to a new facility, they start over in the program. So these placements can last anywhere from 4 months to 2 years, depending on how the kid does in the facility. So if you spent 6 months in a placement and now you have to go to a new one, you're starting over. Your time is starting over in that new placement. And we just have to hope that that new facility can meet your needs better than the last one. And that's really what we end up doing, is just hoping they do better, because they're all very, very similar.
Thank you. Senator Fontana.
Wow. Are there any success stories as far as, you know, it almost, I represent Montour and Stowe Rocks, by the way, and so I know how it's night and day in a lot of aspects. This is the most alarming, I guess, because these kids aren't getting, is it, when you go back to the schools, back to the beginning, before, I guess, they get to a judge or get to a state-run school, they are entered into a public school, right? First, and that's where the IEP and those kinds of things can take place. Are teachers do they not care, or are they not trained well enough to identify a child that needs help, so they can at least start with the IEP? That seems like the first step. Am I right? Is that the first step? If you're a teacher and you realize there's something amiss with a child, would that be the first step?
Yeah, so a school has a legal obligation to identify these students, right? And that can be the teacher, that can be the parent going to the school and saying, hey, they have been habitually failing, they're wandering the hallways, you keep calling me, what's going on? So it can happen either way. And yes, it's to identify the behavior. But why is it not happening? It's a combination of the two things, right? So in part, it's lack of training, right? Okay. But on the second side, it is teachers have a right as victims of sometimes violent behavior to pursue charges in the juvenile justice system. And so, you know, there's good teachers and there are bad teachers. There are teachers that care, there's teachers that don't care. And, you know, there's also personal issues between teachers and kids. And so if a teacher says, I feel like you pushed me from behind or laid hands on me, I want to divert you to the juvenile justice system, and there's no legal requirement that when a kid is sent to juvenile justice, that there's a sort of checks and balance within the school district itself to make sure, like, oh, are we meeting our legal obligation to see if there's something else going on to prevent these issues?
So the child will go to the district justice system, and then that magistrate or judge puts them in a state-run facility. Is that then it goes there?
No, so normally most schools, for what we see, schools are sometimes skipping the magistrate system, which would be low-level summary offenses. They're referring directly to common police court and misdemeanors and felonies.
Okay.
But misdemeanors can be completely subjective charges like disorderly conduct, which is what we frequently see. And so they don't go to state facilities immediately. But I think sometimes there's a lack of education within the school districts that they don't understand that. So they think if they refer a child to juvenile justice, that will solve their problem immediately. It does not, because we use a least restrictive alternative model in terms of consequences for behaviors. So the kids do go back to the home school district, but with a probation in tow, a probation officer.
Right.
And I just, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. That's what
I just wanted to say one other thing, that there are successes. We just don't see those. We see, right, because they're not, right. So we get the kids who are usually aggressive. So they're the ones who, the teachers aren't trained to deal with kids who are aggressive. I don't know, you know, that's not why they went into public education. Yeah, exactly.
Especially in a Stowe Rocks. You don't get the same in Montour as you do, you know, what's happening in Stowe Rocks. That's my point. I mean, there's broken families, more broken families. You have all that to deal with. And then the state run, the video from the state run, where's the oversight there? I mean, you know, those two people in the blue shirts, they overreacted. They were abusive. So they should have been fired probably. So, I mean, is there oversight there in these places?
So I can, the issue about aggressive restraints is not new to the juvenile justice system. The Philadelphia Defenders Association has been on top of it just as much as we have. The month preceding what you saw, there were high-level meetings within Allegheny County that involved Mr. Neff, who heads up the Bureau of Juvenile Justice Services, the director of that program specifically, President Judge here of Allegheny County. The conversations were had, and it was expressed that things that we saw before this video were unacceptable. And all I can tell you is that to the day that I sit here, that no systemic changes have occurred.
That's frightening. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate you getting right to the point on that video as well. Representative Kulik.
Hey, thanks, Dan. And ladies, thank you so much. I live in the Montour School District, and so I represent them like Wayne, and I also represent Stowe Rock School District. And, you know, your comment about last year or the year before where there was no paper and members of the community had to go in. And I apologize, I'm having some work done here at my house today. But, you know, the fact that they face those issues, you know, the people down there are so remarkable. And I know the teachers and the administrators down there are working so hard for these kids and are so dedicated to them. But you know, the school districts spot each other, and the kids from down there know what's going on at Montour and know what Montour has that they don't have. But, you know, I remark all the time about how dedicated the people in Stowe Rocks are to those kids. They just don't have the resources. And, you know, I fight all the time saying we're not funding them properly. Just, you know, with this fair funding, it doesn't balance out what these kids are able to get. And you know, it's just funny that you're, you know, focusing on two of my districts and the disparities, but, you know, I really appreciate the comments you're making and, you know, putting forth the need to change what is going on. These kids need to pull out. I mean, you know, there's good things.
Anita, we're losing your audio there. Anita, Anita, I think we lost your audio there. You're kind of slipping.
It's getting.
So, and just
go ahead.
To follow up what she was saying, yes, for certain, Sam Weaver, who is the Dean of Students at Stowe Rock School, I have endless respect for him. I deal with him, quite frankly, so much that I can identify his voice on a phone without him saying his name. And I've seen how he interacts with not just like my kiddos, but their parents. And I can see the frustration on all of the sides. But when I also know that I have a special education student coming from Stowe Rocks, and essentially their support is a classroom with a teacher that is staffed if that teacher is not on leave. Like, it's just not enough. But yeah, Mr. Weaver and the staff at the school, wonderful, but they're working with really nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that, and it's hard, when you have, and Wayne knows, I think we represent a lot of the same school districts, and I've got 3 very well-funded school districts, and I've got 3 underfunded school districts, and it's hard. It's when I see kids that are able to move into the Montour school districts, that they're going to be able to get housing in the district, and I think, well, at least this kids get to go somewhere. And when you see Propel Montour, their biggest draw of students is coming from the Stowe Rock School District, and that is just putting an extra burden on Stowe Rocks because they have to come up with the money to pay for those kids to go to Propel Montour, and it's such a catch-22 for that district that they cannot dig out of this hole that they're in.
Well, thank you, Representative Kulik. Definitely appreciate it. I'm just going to slow for a moment in case there's any other additional comments. But, look, I want to, obviously, one of the key things, of course, is that our caucus and everybody on this call have been fighting for special education funding increases, no matter where the child is. So that is something that we have prioritized. But now here, as we're wrapping things up here, approaching the second hour mark, look, I again want to compliment the Allegheny County Public Defender's Office for moving so steadfast into this arena. I think we are all concerned about every child's education, and that includes the children who are in the delinquency system, and in particular with those with IEPs. We talked a little bit. There's a bill I have that has about a juvenile Miranda bill, right? And in researching that bill, I came across something that showed that the average 16-year-old who gets picked up by the police reads at like a 5th grade level. But in order for them to understand fully their own Miranda rights as given to them, they have to read at a minimum of an 11th grade level, and many in the 12th grade level. So now that doesn't mean that could mean related to an IEP, it could not, but it also talks about the type of challenges many of the children, not all the children, but many of the children face when they come into the delinquency system in general. In some ways, they're already have been failed by many. And so that's not to say good work and hard work isn't being done. It clearly is. But for too many, especially with an IEP, we're not working. It's not working. Beck, when you were going over, your team's going over some of the stories, I still remember representing a 10-year-old who was charged with a felony 2 aggravated assault, who had an IEP and severe anxiety issues. And during standardized testing, he couldn't take it, and he jumped underneath the desk and just stayed underneath the desk. Didn't hurt, didn't make a sound, stayed underneath the desk. The teacher did what she should have done, which is call the office and let them know there was some degree of a challenge in the room. When the help arrived, in essence, the help decided the best way to deal with it was to pull the young man, the 10-year-old, out by his foot. And again, he wasn't doing anything, right? But he was underneath the desk. So the young man, in trying to say that he couldn't take doing the test anymore, he needed a break. The young man then kicked back. And when he kicked back, he gave the guy not a cut lip, but I guess a swollen lip. And then they charged him with a felony 2. And then they didn't want to get off that felony 2, right? And with a 10-year-old who they knew they had a clear a support plan that they failed, and an IEP plan that with the young man, and some degree of a manifestation of his diagnosis that they were dealing with. But they still looked to criminalize that young man with a felony. We struggle still with dealing with a juvenile justice system that is not well funded. And the policies often are not where they should be as well. So I very much appreciate you bringing to us not only your work, but highlighting some of the challenges that still remain. And it is definitely something I know that all our members here are interested. I will point out again, Representative Lee and Representative Zabel, who I know I've had many conversations with of recent times. So I do hope that we can come together with some more policy points that I think we can use to improve this situation. And Senator Fontana, as always, he kind of gets right to a good point with it there. Your video stuff there was, as I said, it was damning and compelling. And it is something to which I hope that when we talk next, you'll see some action from us about at least things that we can do to hopefully provide greater opportunity for those kids that you're making such a good effort with to help improve their futures. So with that, coming up, I know I talked to 11:02, slightly over. So I want to thank all my colleagues for joining us today. I want to thank the good Chairman Bizzarro for letting us do a hearing today for this topic. We had two great panels with relevant, timely information about how to improve MAUD and financial futures for people with disabilities who are working, and then to talk about the clearly systemic issues that the Allegheny County PDs are finding, but I guarantee you are all across the state in relation to our shortcomings as a Commonwealth in improving educational goals for kids with IEPs in the delinquency system. That's what this summit is all about, is to try and highlight those types of issues and hopefully bring them more to the forefront. I know that every member cares about it, no matter where they are from this. I appreciate it. People from the East, Representative, Herron and Free-Lawton and so forth, and Zabel. And then from the West out here, of course, with my colleagues and from Allegheny County and, Nick and Jake and, everybody out here in Pittsburgh with it. It's going to take that statewide effort to make a difference. We will look to be back next year in person. So we'll keep that in mind, but we'll be back as a summit at 12 o'clock today with two options for people to participate with. One is a return to the workplace, developing disability, inclusive telework and COVID-19 health and safety policies, working with SEED about employment issues. It's a big topic. And then the second one we have is putting the pieces in place during the pandemic, a focus on students with autism with our local school districts and the Autism Connection of Pennsylvania. Those are your options at 12 o'clock. Thank you all presenters. Thank you, colleagues, and we'll see you all soon.